I think this is something important that people should know about.
Who were the Menim, and what do they teach us about the early church and synagogue?
The Menim, both the Christians and the Jewish Christian sects, stressed the universal foundation in the mitzvot, statutes, and regulations, in the Torah rather than the practical mitzvot, but gave special importance to the Ten Commandments, which continued to be binding, including those between God and mankind. As a result of this, the rabbis canceled the saying of the Ten Commandments together with the paragraphs of the Shema prayer, so that no one should mistakenly think that the mitzvot included in the Ten Commandments were more binding than the rest of the mitzvot in the Torah, as the Menim claimed.
Aaron Oppenheimer, removing the Decalogue in Jewish and Christian tradition.
Again, the Ten Commandments would be an expansion of the two great commandments. People will often say, oh, no, we just have to love God and love man now. No. I mean, it's not that it's not that. It's that that was the case. That's always been the case, that we're to love God and love man. That's the problem. That's a summation of the problem. The Ten Commandments just describe what that looks like. The only reason people say that is because of the Sabbath anyway. They want to muddy the water.
Page 99.
So the rabbis quit saying the Shema, which is Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, and repeating the Ten Commandments, because the Menim said that the Ten Commandments were universal, while the other mitzvot, the other statutes, were not universal.
This is his channel. He's a pastor friend of mine, or a friendly, I don't know him in real life, so real life. He's a very friendly acquaintance, I'll say it that way. Okay, so I consider him a friend, but I like this post. He used one of my quotes, so I'm going to reference it here because I appreciate it. There's more we could look at too. Look, all the early creeds in the early churches, in most churches, including the Reformed, Protestant, Catholic, Orthodox, they all are just reflecting Jesus' words in the Sermon on the Mount. So they say this, and let's read. This is why they're saying it. This is why early church fathers and all creeds historically had recognized this. It's really, you guys, this, even other evangelicals or like Protestant derivatives like Pentecostals and their affiliated, they would always say the Ten Commandments are binding. That's why we have the Ten Commandments all over the United States. Many of these derivatives, though, just kind of referred to Sunday as the Sabbath. You can see this, you can read in the 1800s, just whether it be any denomination, because it's so logically obvious, it's demanded by the references in the New Testament. It's modern times, and then these other churches adopt these more modern people who want to separate the Jews in the church in some way, or say, some of those people go extreme. They'll say some of the New Testament isn't for Christians, it's written to Jews only. And no one in Christian history ever thought that. It's so outrageous. And now there's so many sects that will say that. It's so untenable. It's outrageous. Oh, well, we're not saying Jesus' teaching is irrelevant for us. We're just saying, look, dude, that's just. So let me read some of these early quotes that a couple here. Try to zoom in on that. So, I mean, almost everybody until 100 years ago, until Adventism was invented and the Sabbath thing came to the forefront, largely, do people start getting wishy-washy about this? It really is the case historically. Well, the Sabbath it doesn't matter, so let's start teaching. We can misuse Paul and pretend like the commandments he's talking about aren't the 10 commandments, even though every time Jesus references commandments, he references the 10 commandments. Paul references them in Romans several times. James references them. If there's any time God's commandments are referenced, the 10 commandments are quoted to some degree, which James says, if you've broken one, you've broken them all. They're not done away with. That would be absurd if you just consider what that would mean. Oh, Jesus just doing away with, do not murder. But what about the Sermon on the Mount? Think about Jesus. See, it was foretold that the suffering servant would magnify the law and make it honorable. Jesus fulfills that prophecy by teaching the Sermon on the Mount. And that is for all people. That's for humanity. Okay. Let's look at some of these quotes. And people, until Sabbath derangement syndrome got invented, people would just agree with this. They just say the 10 commandments are binding. Obviously, that's just logically obvious. The text demands it. So, I'll read this. If you love me, keep my commandments. Somehow the Christian world, after centuries of acknowledging that the Decalogue applies to all people, has decided that it wasn't given by Christ, so they don't need to observe the day that God asked people to remember. Irenaeus was in the 100s AD. He said this, and he said this because of the Sermon on the Mount. Preparing man for this life, the Lord himself did speak in his own person to all alike the words of the Decalogue. That means the 10 commandments. And therefore, in like manner, do they, the 10 commandments, the Decalogue, remain permanently with us. Well, yeah, they're in the Bible right now. Receiving by means of his advent in the flesh extension and increase, but not abrogation. Think of Matthew, right? I did not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill. Therefore, anyone who teaches one of the least of these commandments should be called least in the kingdom of heaven. Whoever teaches and does them shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. Then he goes on to quote the 10 commandments in the context. That was Irenaeus in the early 100s. Because the text demands this, right? Now, you can go two directions with that. You can obey the 10 commandments like Jesus taught and teach and do them and be called great in the kingdom of heaven, or you can pretend like Jesus' message wasn't for you because you're not a Jew, which is false. Here's another one. Another early church father, book 4, chapter 16, Stromata, Clement of Alexandria. He goes through the 10 commandments, and I'll quote, and the fourth word is that which intimates that the world was created by God, that he gave us the seventh day as a rest on account of the trouble that there is in this life. And by the way, people who keep the Sabbath live longer, happier lives. Because you can't just work every day. It's bad for you. And it's a commandment of God, so you should follow it. Why would think about it. Why would God take that away? Yeah, Jesus is our rest. Yeah, you could say that. That's true. But all of a sudden now, look at like all the medication people take. Look at the issues people have in their lives. Imagine if they actually obeyed this commandment, what it would do for them. Did Jesus take that away because Jesus is our rest and he doesn't want us to be healthy and happy? That doesn't make any sense. For God is incapable of weariness and suffering and want, but we who bear flesh need rest. Wow, how true is that? The seventh day, therefore, is proclaimed a rest. So, I mean, do what you want. But it's pretty clear what everybody recognized until recent modern times historically. God bless.